coverage of the war in Ukraine. I'm Amarachi Ubani.
And I'm Millicent Walker. First, the headlines. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky repeats plea for no-fly zone over Ukraine in address to U.S. Congress.
Russian forces inch towards Kyiv with intensified fighting around the capital.
Plus, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says he sees some hope for reaching a compromise in the negotiations over the war in Ukraine.
Welcome again. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky invoked the horror of the 2001 terror attacks on the U.S. as he pleaded for more military aid in a historic address to the U.S. Congress.
Volodymyr Zelensky said via video link that Ukraine is enduring a 9/11 every day as it battles Russian forces. The Ukrainian president received a standing ovation as he finished his remarks to bipartisan members of the U.S. House and Senate. He also received a standing ovation before he spoke.
Let's take a look at the latest from day 21 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
U.S. Congress, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky reiterated his calls for the establishment of a no-fly zone over Ukraine and called for more sanctions on Russia. Zelensky directly addressed the U.S. President Joe Biden in his speech to Congress, calling on him to be the leader of peace. His address comes as Russian forces inch towards Kyiv with intensified fighting around the capital. Two high-rise residential buildings were hit by Russian shells in Kyiv early this morning, injuring 2 people. People across the city have been taking shelter in bunkers as part of a 2-day curfew. The city's mayor says it's a difficult and dangerous moment for the capital. In Kyiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, emergency services say 2 people have died after Russian shells hit an apartment block. And in Mariupol, the deputy mayor says Russian troops are still holding 400 people, including doctors and patients, like hostages, inside a hospital. Meanwhile, NATO defense ministers have met with their Finnish, Georgian and Swedish counterparts, as well as the Ukrainian ambassador, to discuss the situation in Ukraine.
Since the start of the Russian invasion, allies have significantly stepped up our support for the brave Ukrainian people, government and the armed forces, with military equipment, humanitarian and financial assistance, and giving shelter to millions of refugees. Today, it is even more important that we all support Ukraine.
President Zelensky has hinted that he does not expect his country to join NATO anytime soon. Kyiv's wish to be part of the alliance was among the grievances Russian leader Vladimir Putin cited in an attempt to justify his invasion of Ukraine. And on negotiations, President Zelensky says peace talks with Russia are beginning to sound more realistic. Russia's foreign minister says there is hope for compromise, but that negotiations are not easy. The talks continue.
Washington correspondent Maria Bird joins us now. Maria, this will be the second time in 2 weeks that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has addressed the U.S. Congress. How different was this address from the first?
I think that he knows where the U.S. stands at this time. I think that the real request now is looking at how is the U.S. beyond the actual financial contributions, is really looking for some more action physically from the U.S. and really noting that we know that the NATO allies of the U.S. are now, when we talk about Poland, and so is the U.S. planning to do more than provide financial assistance and to obviously state their support from a very from a stately perspective, from a global affairs leader perspective, but are they willing to walk side by side and stand side by side with the Ukrainian people?
That he was also, and talking about Zelensky, talking to the American people as much as it was the U.S. lawmakers. What are public opinion surveys showing about how Americans feel about the conflict?
Americans obviously have never been in support of the conflict. The Americans, so, are very concerned about potentially having the U.S. armed forces actually be on the ground, boots on the ground in Ukraine. We know that there were 2 American journalists that have had unfortunately untimely deaths. And so we are looking at, really, I think, from the American people, are asking the president, that they don't really want to see more Americans entering a war, that many people feel that this is not an American war. So I think the support is there for standing in support of the Ukrainian people and to do what can be done from a humanitarian perspective. But as far as going in to some sort of war, at this time, we're still not hearing that many Americans are in support of that.
You mentioned the concern about U.S. forces being drawn into the conflict, but where does the U.S. stand on Americans who are volunteering to be part of that conflict? And that would be, fighting the Russians in Ukraine.
I think that's an excellent point that you've noted here, those who are volunteering. Many Americans have, very strong ties right here in the U.S. You can see the Ukrainian embassy is each and every day flooded with those who are protesting, those who are supporting the Ukrainian people. And so we know there are many those who live here in America who have strong ties and who are willing to stand forth. And many Americans that have had some challenges. Obviously, we know that Russia and the U.S. have not always had friendly relationships, but we also know that most recently, in the recent Trump administration, the U.S. Had a different sort of relationship, and really it was the Trump administration more so than the American people. So, those who are deciding to volunteer, I think that Americans are supporting them. But to say that financial efforts, the U.S. is dealing with major financial challenges, the stock market is just starting to move in the right direction. We know we're dealing with increase in gas prices, which is directly related to oil. So some of our energy costs are going up. So I think America feels there's many things that have to be addressed internally, that to put efforts and to put financial, which will be additional financial resources, in addition to the $800 million, by having armed forces.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Potentially
Maria, just looking at President Zelensky in the video as he made his address to Congress, you see a man who's had many days in him not standing on the front lines, but having stayed nights awake watching. And
It appears we've lost Maria.
It appears we lost signal with Maria. Maria was reporting on the U.S. Congress receiving the address of Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president. But joining us now to also look at this is geopolitical expert, Mr. Edward Okpa. He joins us from Dallas, Texas. Mr. Okpa, thank you for joining us on the program.
You're not in Nigeria yet. So what's the situation where you are? Where are you?
There does seem to be some mix-up.
Indeed. We will have Victor much later, but we are indeed talking with a geopolitical expert, and this is to confirm if we have him, Mr. Edward Okpa.
We did see him a minute ago. We did see him a while ago.
Okay, I think he can hear us now.
Yeah, so Mr. Okpa, you have been watching, apparently from miles away, obviously, the situation going on and unfolding in Ukraine from the time that the war started, the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, and now we're seeing the devastation of the country. What do you make of Russia's advancement so far?
Thank you for having me on the show. It's really unfortunate that in the 21st century, we still have, the type of thing that is going on now in Russia. One would have thought by now, the world would have advanced to where, like the Bible says, love thy neighbor and try to have a relationship that is neighborly. So that way we can avoid these things. But then, we have leaders that have egos, and because they have egos and they think they have some military might, they try to impose on neighboring country. That's what Russia is doing, and it's very unfortunate.
So the president, that's the U.S. president this time, is expected to announce $800 million of military aid to Ukraine. The U.S. Senate already approved, a huge amount, almost 13.8 billion, I think, for Ukraine as well, in military aid. Do you consider this participation in the war by proxy?
Well, I mean, anytime you're doing something like that, Russia is going to interpret it that U.S. is enabling, and then they're going to hold, stand their ground and do whatever it is. Remember, Ukraine and Russia, have had this tension back and forth. Ukraine wants to be part of NATO. Russia, sees that as an unnecessary membership because that's, right next door to it. Just imagine if Russia were to be in Canada or in Mexico, how would the U.S. react to it? So we have to be very sensitive. We have to recognize that every country has their own ego, they have their own pride, and they want to have neighbors, that are friendly. So U.S. giving money, of course, that's what they can do at this stage, because I don't think American soldiers, American forces, are going to get into Ukraine to fight the war, because that was just going to escalate the war. So whatever we have to do now to support Ukraine while negotiation is going on is what makes sense. It's unfortunate this is happening, the destruction of life and property, and then, the extended impact on the world with commodities prices going off the roof is really very unfortunate. I don't know what we can do as a people so that we have a peaceful world.
And President Putin has also said that he will not forgive. This is the West and, the supports that they are giving Ukraine. He has also talked about how a lot of the sanctions are sort of backfiring. It says that there will be loss of employment. A lot of people will lose their jobs. What do you make of such stance? And this is in the midst of this invasion as he continues the bombardment.
Well, again, sanctions is not new. That's what America will try to do. But then, with the cross investment and money being everywhere in the world, sometimes the sanctions don't do anything. It will cause temporary discomfort, and then what happens? They find a way to go around it. The thing is, we should be very preemptive. And see how we can avoid this type of thing going on. I mean, not just start by Ukraine, in Africa, in Asia, we have all kinds of regimes that are doing things. And it makes you wonder, what is the role of the United Nations? What is the role of this world organization? Don't they have intelligence to see these things coming and try to get it resolved before lives and properties are wasted? U.S. is doing the best they can, but I think, Ukraine and Russia needs to have the peace talk and look themselves, say, hey, who is dying in this process? It's your citizens that are dying because of, the ego of two people who are leaders. And citizens in the countries should now begin to take their leaders, responsible for these things. At what point do we start to say, hey, we don't want to waste blood unnecessarily just because we want to fight a war, because of the leaders say, hey, I'm the commander-in-chief, I can order people to go do these things. It's not fair.
One also wonders, are we beginning to see some sort of understanding and, if possible, a ceasefire in the future? This is with the foreign ministers and the reports we're hearing and the recent negotiations between both parties.
Yeah, I mean, they're having the talks. They're meeting. It's negotiation. And it's just like anything, any conflict between neighbors. Are you moving the property line? Are you encroaching? This is what goes on. There's something that both sides want, and then something has to give. Are you willing to give that? Swallow your ego and know at the end of the day, it's human lives that are being wasted. That's one thing for me. Why should anybody die because of somebody's wish? I want to be the superpower. I want to be the domineering forces. I mean, Ukraine is a regional neighbor to Russia and other countries. Why don't you guys get together and resolve this matter? Are you fighting over minerals? Okay, fine. If you mine the minerals, we know the quantity. You sell it, and we share the proceeds based on the amount that is found in your various countries, as opposed to this constant tension that draws a lot of people into war. I mean, there's still war. There's still poverty. Why are we not fighting war against poverty instead of these wars that are just keep creating more poverty in the world? That's where we should be doing. How can we address poverty in the world, the illnesses, people dying unnecessarily when we have the resources to come up with medicine, to help people live better life as opposed to having them die because of wars.
Yeah, but this is a characteristic of international politics. Larger and stronger nations are trying to impose on weaker countries, and they have to find, the right sides to align with. But I want to circle back again to this war by proxy, which I mentioned earlier. And the U.S. Is kicking against a no-fly zone over Ukraine, which the President Zelensky has asked for a number of times. So is the NATO also kicking against that. But the Russian president has said that even giving military aid and sending military equipment to Ukraine indicts the U.S. For fighting the war by proxy. It's enraged President Putin, and he's promised, these countries will also receive the result of his wrath at the end of the day.
Yes. I mean, again, indirectly, America is involved because they are giving arms, they are giving money, and Putin is in his own right, based on his own thinking and philosophies, that, hey, if you do this, I'm going to do that. And, mind you, there's still the tension between China and Taiwan. So China is watching to see how Putin is going to pull this off. China might now, boom, do their own thing and get into Taiwan. And then what goes on is a bigger issue going all over the world. So this is a text of leadership, of both two countries. And America should use their power to influence a regional settlement as opposed to escalating. Of course, we have to support the weaker side, which is Ukraine. But, Putin is resolved in this, and he's been watching for the opportunity. Remember when Trump was in there, it was just some peaceful thing going on. And until now, he sees an opportunity that maybe Biden's not going to be able to stop him. And then he took that that chance, and that's where we are.
So just one final question. Looking to the future now, tell us what you're seeing, the dynamics in the relations between Ukraine and the United States and Russia.
Well, I mean, what's the relationship going to be? If at the end that the two sides, come to an agreement to peacefully exist, then that suits them better. However, Ukraine interprets the United States is up to them. But they have to do what is right for their own country, and they have to do what is right for their own regional coexistence. America cannot afford to be the policeman or, all over the world. Our resources are stretched. You come into America and you will be shocked at the level of socioeconomic disadvantage that is in this country. So why are we out there, flagging all this? America is superpower. Come to America and you'll be shocked. The poverty level, the homelessness issues, some neighborhoods that are destroyed, that, still looks like it's a fifth world country. So charity has to start from home. Let's be realistic about this exaggerated global image we put out there when in our own various countries, people are dying. So however Ukraine interprets us, at the end of the day, my encouragement to them is walk with your neighbor and love your neighbor. That is the best way. The Bible has told us that God loves us and he loves us if we love our neighbor. That is the final solution. It shouldn't be stretching your arm across the ocean looking for a partner who is thousands of miles away from you. Stretch your hand across the fence. Each one reach one to expand the franchise of life. That's what's going to get the world a peaceful place and not military might. It has never worked. And
I was going to say that I wish they're listening to you right now.
Well, he's taking us to church now. So this is another dimension to this whole crisis.
I'm a scholar. I read, and I believe in the supreme power of God. I say love thy neighbor. So why are we human beings not loving our neighbor? You know, that's the solution. That's the solution to world peace.
That's up for discussion. Edward Ejikeokwa, thank you again for speaking with us. Thank
you for having me.
Still to come on the program, NATO vows more help for Ukraine as ministers meet in Brussels. Stay with us.
Welcome back. NATO defense ministers meeting in Brussels say they will keep helping Ukraine fight off Russia's invasion. Diplomats and military analysts estimate the NATO allies have sent more than 20,000 anti-tank and other weapons to Ukraine since the invasion started February 24. Defense ministers say NATO countries will continue to deliver weapons to Ukraine even as those deliveries could become the target of Russian attacks.
President? Well, I think it's very important to continue to deliver because President Zelensky is asking for weapons and Ukraine has the right to defend itself. And therefore, we as the Netherlands intend to continue, as other countries will. And I think that the fact that he is saying that they could be a target shows that it is something that is feared.
We are very lucky that we're all part of a NATO alliance here. It's luck and it's a privilege to be part of this, an amazing self-defense alliance that brings security to Europe and the North Atlantic. And I think, you know, coming here today, we should also remind ourselves how lucky we are. There is Ukraine, a country currently effectively under siege by an aggressive Russian armed forces. And, you know, that's why they wanted to join this alliance. And I think we have to see what more we can do to give them that support. I think that's really important. Look, and of course, we've been very clear that, you know, NATO is an alliance, you know, attack on one, you attack us all, whether you are the biggest or the smallest country. Thank you very much.
Now, the Russia-Ukraine conflict has brought tragic loss of life and destruction across Ukraine, with about 3 million refugees streaming into neighboring countries in just 2 weeks. As the heavy bombardments of Ukrainian cities and clashes continue, the rising death toll in an unfolding humanitarian disaster are of paramount concern. The crisis is also causing political and economic disruptions across the world, with businesses navigating conflict-related risks to their people, assets, operations and supply chains in the region and globally. Companies are also seeking legal advice on the possible impact of an evolving sanctions regime on their businesses. In terms of insurance, premium payments or claims transactions may be stopped, or there may be delays while banks request further information before processing.
To discuss the security challenges and recommend solutions, we have joining us Dr. Kabiru Adamu, the founder, managing director, Beacon Consulting Limited, an enterprise security risk management and intelligence in Nigeria and the Sahel. Thank you for joining us on the program.
My pleasure, Millicent. Good evening.
Good evening. Before this invasion, there were warning signals for several months. For example, a firm had sent reports highlighting the rapidly growing tensions and implications for the organization. Also, in January, a sort of health and security services firm deployed an incident management team in Ukraine to bolster its operational planning, in preparation for the conflict. I mean, looking at the level of destruction after more than 2 weeks, was there anything else that they could have done?
Unfortunately, yes. So modern security looks at two major angles, which is the business continuity and contingency planning and resilience. So in circumstances like this, where the possibility of an all-out conflict is likely, you build scenarios, and one of those scenarios would have included the invasion like we're seeing it today, and of course, putting in place likely outcomes of that invasion. So as an example, what happens if you are a business owner, the invasion takes place? Well, what do you need to do? Or if you're an individual, a family member as an example, what would you need to do to avoid that? Can you reduce your family members to only, or your staff to only essential members of that staff? Or in this instance, as a country, what aspects of your industries can you reduce? So again, it's all about business continuity and contingency planning, as well as in the case of businesses, resilience. readiness. And of course, for the country, what is called emergency preparedness.
We've seen in particular public statements, demonstrable actions, including ruling out US troops on a ground in Ukraine fighting the Russians, also the discussion of the no-fly zone, even after Zelensky repeated needing that. But some experts say that, you know, this is shrouded in a language that speaks to a fear of escalation. Do you think that fear exists with NATO or its allies?
No, definitely. Let's not forget that Russia has one of the highest nuclear arsenals in the world, 6,000 plus warheads. Ukraine too has over 2,000 warheads. And in the nuclear balance, this is what the world has always been afraid of, you know, having a situation where countries that have nuclear, you know, capabilities are at war. And the possibility of the slightest spark igniting a bigger conflagration is always likely. So yes, the brinksmanship we're seeing on both sides, on the sides of Putin and on the sides of NATO, is real, because the fear is one that could affect the world almost fundamentally. In fact, the language of a third world war is being used significantly. Just a few days ago, when Russia bombed a location close to Poland, that language, you know, was ignited again. So clearly, both sides are conscious of that, and I think the brinksmanship will continue until perhaps we see who does the last brink.
We're talking language. What are you interpreting from Russia's actions so far? The fact that, you know, it seems as if, you know, troops have stalled for a while, but they've taken a number of cities. And then there's fear by Ukraine's neighbors that they might as well be attacked by Russia. What are you reading from the language, you know, that Russia's putting out there?
In simple terms, determination. Russia under Putin has determined its national interest, and for now, the language it's sending to the world is that it's not in its national interest for Ukraine to join NATO, and that it would take any action to prevent that from happening. And so one obvious angle of all of this is determination. It seems to be pursuing this war to send a message not just to Ukraine, but to the other neighbors who may be tempted to toe the line of Ukraine by joining NATO.
And talking about, you know, risk assets and assessments and all that, and I'm sure that the Russian government may have considered, you know, how much loss and, you know, would result from this attempt, this military action in Ukraine. You think they also considered, you know, the civilian casualties, the Russian side as well as the Ukrainians? I mean, you see President Zelensky still putting up a brave face despite, you know, the number of deaths so far.
So that charter is currently ongoing within the intelligence spheres. There is a suggestion, for instance, that you know, Putin has been shocked by that resilience. He never imagined, for instance, that it would take this long before he captures Kyiv, as an example. And then the number of Russian soldiers that have been lost as a result of the invasion. And let's remember that the sanctions that have been imposed on him have touched the very essence of the Russian economy. But it also appears that he anticipated that and so has made a lot of changes, and that has reduced the impact of some of the sanctions. One thing is obvious. The continuation of those sanctions will affect his popularity, and he knows that once his popularity is affected, then it becomes very tenuous for him to continue such a very expensive campaign. And that's on the one hand. On the other hand, you've got nationalists who agree with him, who would do anything to support him to go to any extent. So again, that brinksmanship I talked about earlier would determine the outcome of all of this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kabir Adamu. Your analysis is just perfect, what we needed to hear at this time. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Well, from our digital studio, we go live to our technology correspondent, Victor Mathias, who is engaging with our online community. Also joining him are some Nigerians who fled the Ukraine crisis. Take it away, Victor.
Thank you. This is the online segment of the program. And like Millicent said, We have some Nigerians who have actually fled the invasion by Russia in Ukraine. Thing is, we have some good news. We're speaking to some Nigerians who are already back here in Nigeria, and some of whom have remained in Ukraine. Some have also fled. They're still in neighboring countries and are yet to come back. But just before you came to me, Millicent, I was speaking with Olale, and he was giving me a brief, of how it feels, to be back home. So Olale, again, just tell us how it feels to be back home, after all that happened. Thankfully, again, you're back home. What's the feeling like?
It's a good feeling because it's very good to be with family. It's very good to have peace, because the most important thing that was taken away in those moments was the peace of everyone. So it's very good to be around my family and to see them at peace. It's a very different world in Nigeria than what we had in Ukraine, but we're adapting, and we're taking it a day at it as it comes. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the next step? What's with school? I know some other students have started schooling online. Have you been contacted by your school with regards continuation of studies?
Yes, we've been contacted by the school. We've continued studies online. We're continuing with our regular timetable, which it's not very strange for us because we've been doing a lot of online classes due to COVID as well. So it's pretty regular actually, and we're just trying to maintain some sense of normalcy and trying to complete our curriculum.
Have you heard from some of your friends? Because we understand some people are staying back, in the neighboring countries to Ukraine. Have you heard from some of the people that you were together with who might have, for one reason or the other, decide not to come home?
Yes, I know of a few friends who stayed back in neighboring countries. Some found ways to get into EU countries. So I know a few people who are in Germany at the moment. I know some people who stayed back in Romania where I was, and decided it was a good opportunity to try to process visa to visit family in other countries as well. So I know of a few people who are staying back, and the fact that classes are continuing online means that they can also just use the flexibility to achieve other things. So yes, people are staying back.
All right, great. Just hold there for a bit. Let me also quickly hear from Samuel. Samuel is also back, home to Nigeria. Samuel, again, earlier on you gave us a sneak peek into what it feels like to be home. But again, what are the plans moving forward for you? Have you started school online as well, or what's the situation with you?
Yeah, actually, I've started classes online. So, like he said, all these are not kind of new to us because during the COVID period, we had classes online. So this doesn't stop us from reading our books. We still read our books. The teachers come online, ask us questions, we still answer, like as if we're in physical classes. So nothing's actually new. Just that we're just hoping on God that with time, everything will get back to normal.
So how did you come back home? What was your mode of return? Did you take part in the federal government's evacuation plan, or how did you come back home, and from which country did you come back home?
Okay, actually, I booked my flight myself with the help of Aziz. So I from Slovakia I went to Austria. From Austria, then I came to Nigeria.
Oh wow! So it was a personal plan.
Yes.
Has anyone contacted you to maybe refund, or have you made moves to ask for a refund?
No, not really.
Why didn't you take part of the federal government's evacuation process?
Because there was no evacuation flight here in Austria. I think it was just for Poland, Romania, and I think Hungary. These three countries, which I was not in these three countries at the moment.
Wouldn't it have been cheaper for you to go to any of those countries than coming home, or why did you just decide to take it to yourself?
Yeah, actually, it would have been cheaper, but the whole stress and all that, my parents were just more like, come back, want to see you. So me, like, trying to say, okay, I want to go back to this country, go back here to, like, cause a lot of havoc at home and stuff like that. So I had to maybe obey my parents by just coming back home since they already had the money to pay for the flight.
All right, very well. Let me hear from you, Esther. For some reason, you're still in Ukraine, you know, with all that is going on. Esther, why did you decide to stay back?
Yeah, like I said earlier, number one is because of my certificate. I don't want to go back home and then I have to come back and then go back home again because I'll be done this year. And then also the city is calm, it's safe for now. So I felt deep within that. I want to still be here. That's why I'm staying. Mainly for my certificate, actually.
Which city are you in?
Uzhgorod.
Uzhgorod. So are you studying online or are you still, what's the mode of study for now?
Yeah, we are back to our classes and it's online. It's not offline yet, it's online for now.
So I mean, are there others with you around? Are there others, you know, in the same university as you?
No. Most of my group mates, they are Indians and they are home already. And even for them, they keep telling me, because I'm the monitor in my class, we have meetings at times, and then they keep telling me, ask the dean, ask their agents, will they get their certificate? Do they have to come back? They are also worried, even though they are at home. And for me, I don't want to go home and then have to come back like 3 times. You know?
Yeah.
But there are some students around me, they are not in my year. So they came from other cities, but they're also having their own studies online.
Okay, are there Nigerians or Africans?
Yeah, I think some are Nigerians, and then there are Ghanaians among them as well. Yeah, even Zimbabwe. There's a Zimbabwean guy here.
Oh, awesome. So it's more like an African community, still staying together, still holding on tight, you know, and well, just always just be around people, remain safe. But Aziz, let me get to hear from you this time around. I mean, from the last time we spoke, of course, I've had you on this platform before, but from the last time we spoke, what has changed, you know, where you are, what has been happening? How many more people have you been in contact with that are still yet to return to Nigeria?
Okay, thank you very much, Matthias. Actually, like I said earlier, the situation right now is really calm. I actually basically hear from everybody that is from my city because, like I said earlier, I'm the Nigerian Student Union president in my city. So basically, even parents of students call me and ask questions. But the good thing is that there are NGOs in EU countries that they've really been helping us. Like basically people that are in Germany, Slovakia, Poland, anywhere they go, they meet NGOs and they ask them what do they need. Do they need accommodation? Do they need finances? Do they need food? And they're ready to help. Some have gone to Nigeria through the federal government by the evacuation flight. They went Hungary, Poland, but people are still staying behind because they're in final years. And if you go to Nigeria right now and your temporary residence permit expires, so what happens? Does it mean you just leave school like that? Does it mean your 6 years in medical school is a waste? So people are sitting around to hear from their school, to hear what's next. But right now, classes started on Monday, like I said. So we are actually having online classes. And it's like normal, like what everyone said. During the time of COVID, we'll be doing online classes. So it's kind of like the same thing. So we're not really feeling like that, but we're just hoping like, okay, the war comes to an end and we can go back to our bases. And one issue that we're actually having right now is the issue of apartments. But back in Ukraine, our apartments, our properties are still in our houses back in Ukraine. So most issue that we're having right now, so people actually call me, what do we do with our apartment? Or landlords are actually calling students that, oh, what is your house as a refugee camp? And your loads are there. What do we do with your load? That's actually one of the issues right now. But we're able to talk to the landlords and everything. If they can keep students' properties very safe, why even they taking refugees in those houses? So I think this is actually like getting calm with students. People are actually going to see their families, and everyone is kind of calm right now. So that's the situation. I'm still in Slovakia, and I'm staying in a place where it's been given to me by some Slovakian family, and they give me food and some stuff. So it's kind of okay, yeah.
All right, great. I'm glad that you know you found a host family that is supporting and is providing shelter, providing food as well. Thankfully, they continue to be this generous with all of these. And of course, till you have till things are calm for you to go back. But let's also quickly just hear from Shadrach. Shadrach, I want to believe you are in Romania now. The last time I spoke with you, you were in Slovakia. But
sorry, Matthias, can you come again, please?
Okay, I'm like, the last time I spoke with you, you were in Slovakia. Now I understand you are in Romania. What has changed since you made the move from Slovakia to Romania?
Okay, yeah, real quick. Actually, I was formerly in Moldova. I just moved from
Moldova. Yeah.
So basically, like for me personally, I think here in Romania it's more comfortable. It's more kind of, we actually stay in the camp, so we have much free space to kind of stroll around. And yeah, basically, the whole change of environment for me is not a bad one, because we're actually more concerned when we are leaving Moldova as well, coming here to Romania, how is it going to turn out? But thanks to God, we came here, and the people here are so welcoming as well, just like the people, just like the Moldovans, and they are taking really good care of us, providing us with where to stay, food to eat, and so many. Some other basic amenities which we all request. They are also helping us out with those stuff. So we are really grateful to them for that.
All right. So, I mean, there was a plane that took off back to Nigeria from Romania. Why didn't you book a plane?
Yeah, for me personally, I just said earlier that I'm in my final year, so I don't want to go back because I don't know how it's going to turn out. I just want to finish my whole studies, so that when I'm going home, I will just rest assured that, yeah, I'm just going home. Yeah, I'm going home. But going home just now will not really give me full joy, because I will be wondering how is the whole thing going to turn out. And if it lasts longer than we are all hoping for, what's going to be the next move? What's going to be the outcome? So that was why personally I have some friends and as well as some brothers that just left home to Nigeria on Monday. But I just said that I'm going to stay back a while to observe the whole thing. And thanks to God, the whole situation is is calming down now, even though there are still some shelling in some other part of Ukraine currently. But it's not like a few weeks ago. Yeah, everything is now coming back to normalcy. So just hoping that everything comes back to normal, so we just go back to Ukraine and finish up my studies before going back to Nigeria.
All right, Shadrach, I have to say that I share your optimism, and I also can't wait for things to be normal, so that, a host of many of you, who are, is now hoping for things to be good, so you can all go back to your studies and things can be calm and everyone can be fine again. But that's the situation from this end, Marachi. Like you heard, some of them are back home and they say it feels good to be home. Some are still in Ukraine. Some are still, like Shadrach just said, is still in Romania. And then someone else, Aziz, is in Slovakia. So Nigerians are still out there. Some are back home gladly. And of course, I will keep reaching out to them. Of course, this conversation is streaming live on our Facebook. So you can still join on the conversation to be a part of it as well and drop your comments. We'll see all of that. But for now, I'll have to hand it back to you in the studio. So Amarachi and Millicent, it's back to you.
Thanks, Victor. Matthias there. When we return, Pope Francis improvises spontaneous prayer for Ukrainian children. That's in a moment. Please join us again.
Welcome back. The Czech and Slovenian prime ministers have wished glory to Ukraine during a press conference with their Polish counterparts after meeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in Kyiv on Tuesday. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, Czech counterparts Peter Fiala and Slovenia's Janez Janša headed to Kyiv by train and assured solidarity with Ukraine even as Russian airstrikes and shelling hit the capital and invading forces tightened their grip. They were the first foreign leaders to visit the capital since Russia's invasion last month. The visit to Kyiv by the EU leaders was a symbol of Ukraine's success so far in feuding off an assault that Western countries believe was aimed at seizing the city weeks ago.
We are bringing here full support for your future, not only European path, but EU membership. I think that, as I said before, if we are looking across Europe now, we don't see any other country which is fighting for European values more than Ukrainian people are doing currently.
Z całą pewnością kwestia przestrzeni powietrznej tutaj też wchodzi w grę. Być może, że на części powierzchni, bo
Деякі невеликі містечка дійсно стерті з лиця землі, там нема жодної вцілілої будівлі, там нема жодної живої душі на сьогодні.
You are fighting for your lives, your freedom, but we know that you are also fighting for our lives and our freedom, and it's for us very important. And I said also at the first briefing that probably main goal of our visit and the main message of our mission is to say to our Ukrainian friends that they are not alone, that Europe stands with you, our countries stand with you, and it's something which I think it's in these days, in these difficult days, very important.
I hope it should be agreed over the next couple of days or weeks, and the candidate status should be given till the end of this year at the latest. Thank you.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson says that the West needs to end its dependency on Russian energy as it allowed Russia's President Vladimir Putin to hold them to ransom. Mr. Johnson arrived in the United Arab Emirates and is to visit Saudi Arabia as part of efforts to secure additional oil flows to replace Russian hydrocarbons and increase diplomatic pressure on Russia's president over his invasion of Ukraine. He promised to set out a new national energy strategy next week and highlighted a new Saudi investment in green aviation fuel project in Britain. He also confirms that Ukraine would not be joining NATO anytime soon, adding the decision on the future of Ukraine was for the people of Ukraine and not Moscow.
So if you look at what Putin's doing in Ukraine, it's causing global uncertainty and a spike in the price of oil. That feeds through to the forecourts in the UK. Everybody can see the effect of the increase in gas prices. That's coming through, and we've got to make sure that we're prepared and that we're taking steps to mitigate that, to help people with the cost of living. So next week we're going to be setting out the energy strategy for the UK. Massive jump forward on renewables, more nuclear, using our own hydrocarbons more effectively. Also looking at what we can do to source hydrocarbons from places other than Russia. We've got to get off Russian hydrocarbons today. And, you know, of course I understand what he's saying about NATO and the reality of the position. And everybody's always said, and we made it clear to Putin, there's no way Ukraine is going to join NATO anytime soon. But the decision about the future of Ukraine has got to be for the Ukrainian people and for Volodymyr Zelensky as their elected leader. And we will back him. And the most important thing is that Putin's aggression, his absolutely barbaric attacks on Ukraine should stop, and they should not be seen to have succeeded, and they won't succeed.
The United Nations Refugee Agency says it's preparing for many more people to flee Russia's invasion of Ukraine than the projected figure of 4 million. UNHCR spokesman Matthew Saltmarsh says the 4 million figure was the basis for the agency's planning to deliver aid, but that it was impossible. More people could cross to safety.
Well, the planning estimate figure, as you said, was and is 4 million. However, there's a realization that it is quite possible, even likely, that the figure will go above that. So we are ready to react if more people come over the border. It is quite possible that many more people will come over the border. We know that in the western parts of Ukraine there are many people who are waiting to see how the conflict develops. If the conflict comes to them, it's quite likely that they'll come here to Poland. We've declared what's called a level 3 emergency. That's the highest level of emergency for UNHCR, and that means that we can deploy goods very quickly, we can deploy people very quickly. So we're ready to scale up even more if more people arrive. For the whole region, so it's not just Poland but the other countries, we put out an appeal with partners for $550 million. That is not fully funded yet, but is significantly funded. That's only a short-term appeal. That runs until August. So that money will start to move very soon.
The UN Development Programme, UNDP, says 9 out of 10 Ukrainians could be plunged into poverty if the war drags on over the next year, wiping out 2 decades of economic gains. Steiner, UNDP administrator, says his agency is working with the Kyiv government to avoid a worst-case scenario of the economy collapsing and hope to provide cash transfers to families to buy food and other basics to keep them from fleeing.
We are presenting a number of scenarios because if the conflict is a protracted one, if it were to continue, we are going to see poverty rates escalate very significantly. Before the conflict, roughly the estimate was about 2% of the Ukrainian population living below the poverty rate. That's about $5.50 a day. With different scenarios in the report, we present numbers that are really extremely worrying. The number of people who could fall below the poverty line could reach 28%, and if the war were to continue, indeed, up to 90% of people could be at risk of falling into poverty or fall below the poverty line. The extreme end of the scenario is an implosion of the economy as a whole, and that could ultimately lead to up to 90% of people either being below the poverty line or being at high risk of, which is defined in international terminology and statistics that we use at a range of between $5.50 and $13. So the consequences clearly are already visible right now. For instance, roughly up to 50% of businesses in the Ukraine have already ceased operating to all intents and purposes. The other 50% are to some extent able to operate. That alone gives you a sense of how fundamental the impact is on the economy of Ukraine just to these first 3 weeks of the conflict.
And finally, this hour, Pope Francis today prayed for Ukrainian children who are suffering and flee from their country's conflict with Russia. Talking during the meeting in St. Peter's Basilica with the students of La Zola School of Milan, before holding the weekly general audience, Pope Francis improvised a spontaneous prayer for Ukrainian children. He said, Lord Jesus, I ask you for the boys and girls who are living under bombs, who see this terrible war, who have no food, who have to flee, live in their homes and everything. Lord Jesus, look at these children, these young people, look at them, protect them. They're the victims of the pride of adults. Lord Jesus, bless these children and protect them. Together we pray to Our Lady to protect them.
Amen.
Francis is right indeed, because at the end of the day, the children are the ones who bear the brunt and will have to rebuild what has been destroyed.
Indeed, and the question is, when?
Food for thought, Beverly said. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.
I'm Liz Walker. Have a good evening.